right, good morning. Some of you have been out where we live. We live out in the country, drive out the holler. We have a dog as you drive out our holler. And as you drive by, he will run out and just bark and try to, chase you. Don't you hate that? It's kind of aggravating. I can remember my mom saying, "What are you going to do if you catch me?" Well, one day when I was driving, and Ella can attest to this, she knows about this dog. One day when I was driving up through there, I was like, that came back to my mind. What would he do if he caught me? So I decided to slow down and stopped. And what did he do, Ella? He just looked at me like, "What are you doing?" And kind of was like, okay. Now, I'm not saying that this will work with every dog, but it worked with this dog. Because you know what? He didn't know what to do with me once I stopped. He liked chasing. For him, it was all about the chasing. It wasn't about what he was going to catch. He just liked to chase. Right? Let me give you another example. You all know I work with children. I've studied about early childhood education. Something that helped a light bulb go off for me and for the folks that work with me, the younger kids, when they do artwork, they really enjoy it. The messier, the better. They like to color and paint and draw. You can't get them to take it home. You're like, "You worked all afternoon on this. Don't you want this?" "No, you can have it." "I don't want it." "You can have it." Or, "I'm going to lay this up here. You remember to take this home." They never remember. It used to drive my staff crazy. They never take this artwork home. So I learned in class, when they're that age, they don't care about the final product. What they cared about was the process, actually doing it. Okay? People that climb mountains. Why do you climb that mountain? Because it was there, right? And so when they climb one, they get to the top, they take the picture, whatever. Then what do? They want to go climb another mountain because it was the process of doing it. And sometimes that's the way we are. We get so caught up, we enjoy the process of doing stuff that we don't think about what happens when we actually achieve it. What are we going to do when we get to that place where we get what we said we wanted? How are we going to act? How is that going to change how we do things? It's great when you think it would be great to finally get what you've been working for. Whether it's you've been working to get to that better job level, to get better pay. But a lot of people, they get promoted to the point that they're just basically administrators and stuff and managers, and they miss the actual work of doing stuff. And then some people don't know how to handle success sometimes. They don't know what to do with it. You think about these people that go out and win the lottery. Well, now there's whole shows you can watch on TV about how terrible their life was, how it changed their life, not necessarily, in some for the better, but some not. It depended on, could they handle it? Could they handle that success, that kind of prosperity? What would you do if somebody said, "You've won $1 million"? Have you ever thought about it? What would you do? Mm-hmm. And that's what happens to a lot. Well, we all know we had someone here in West Virginia, Mr. Whitaker, that won the lottery. Look how his life went. Not so good, right? Because he didn't have a plan. He didn't have, we all think that would be the great thing to do, but if you aren't prepared, how do you handle it? So when you're working toward a goal, something that you have to keep in mind is, what happens when I actually get there? What happens when I actually get there? So what we've been talking about for quite a long time now, we've lately been studying Joshua, but this goes back, we started studying from the time they went into the wilderness all the way through, and all the ups and downs, and the manna and the quail and the serpents and everything that they went through. And we've been talking about all these battles where they've gone in and they've conquered the promised land. And so they're finally at the end game. They're at that point where it's time to inherit the land. So what's that going to be? We talked about last week, we were in chapter 11. Israel had, and I think it was 10 and 11, Israel had defeated the kings of the south and the north. We talked about how the 5 southern kings aligned and they attacked Gibeon. There was retaliation. It was that retaliation for them forming an alliance with Israel. And Joshua and his army went to the aid of them, and that actually was what kicked off the military campaign, where they went out and fought. So they pursued them all through the south, took their cities. The kings were all killed. Very few escaped. They just wiped them out. And then they turned their attention to the north. Remember, we said they were even larger armies, even more kings. They said as many as there is sand on the seashore. That's a lot. It's a lot of people. We've got a wasp friend over there, just to let you know. So they defeated them completely. And then they took on the giants. Remember, that was the one that kept their forefathers. They didn't want to go because they were scared of the giants. And they defeated them. They ran them out of the territory. So now what? Congratulations, Israel. You've won the promised land. What are you going to do now? What are you going to do now? So we've been kind of going chapter by chapter. Sometimes we got in 2. We're actually going to, with this week and next week, we're going to cover a whole bunch. And we're not going to read everything for word. I want you all, when you get a chance, start at chapter 12 and just start reading. Chapter 12 is basically, it's a listing. It starts with the 2 kings that Moses defeated east of the Jordan. We studied about them, and then that land eventually was given to Reuben and Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh, which sometimes you'll see referred to as the Transjordan tribes. Joshua defeated 31 kings within the promised land, and that was going to be divided among the other 9.5 tribes. Now, that's good that we see this, and it lists the geographic boundaries of what was Israel, what they won, what they defeated. It gives you some borders. It outlines what those borders are. When you buy a piece of property or you're looking at your land, you go down to the courthouse and you get the survey maps and you look at the deeds and you can see what's your property. Well, they didn't have that. So they had to make this record of these were the kings that we were defeated. This was where their territories went to, and they give you geographic markers for that. So we're going to be just hitting some of the high points of each chapter. When you have sections like this in the Bible, it would be real easy to just kind of skim over them, because it's a lot of listings of things, listings of territories, or when you're going through and there's sometimes it's the listing of the clans and who was it's real easy to kind of skip over that stuff. It kind of, you hate to say it, it's a little boring, a little dry. But you got to look for the treasures in there. You got to look for the nuggets, the little things that you can bring out. And it's real important that we know where these borders are. And it's going to talk about each tribe and what areas they gave, and it'll give you it went to this river or to this mountain range. Well, how many of you have Bibles that have maps in them? And you have a map that shows how the land was divided by tribe? Have you seen those maps? How do you think they knew how to draw that? From reading these records that said, okay, this is the land of Judah. It went from this part of the country to this part of the country and included this. That's how they knew how to draw it. So it's important that this is in the Bible. Everything is important. So we're going to start with Joshua 13, verse 1. Oh, we're still working on it. Okay. Well, I've got it right here so I can read it. And once they get it up and going, oh, they got it. Well, that's not one, though. But, you've got a map that shows it. Cool. Yeah. Right. Now, this shows the conquered land, and it shows also the people that had inhabited it, like the Jebusites, the Perizzites, the Ammonites. But that's how they know, is because it's in the Scripture. That's where they draw that information from. So 13:1. Now Joshua was old, advanced in years, and the Lord said to him, you are old. When God tells you you're old, okay? You are old, advanced in years, and there remains very much land yet to be possessed. So there was still some land. They had done the majority of it, but there's still some land. There's still some out there. And I was reminded, because I remember Jim teaching on this years ago, about how he said that he wasn't going to, that he was going to do it bit by bit so that the land didn't become a wasteland and the animals would be, going free. Do you remember that? Is he up there? He's probably downstairs. But, but Joshua's old. But he's saying, there's still work to be done. You might feel old, but there's still work to be done, okay? So it's estimated that it took about 7 years for the conquest of Canaan, from the time that they, started the Battle of Jericho and then conquering the rest of the land. It took about 7 years. And Joshua is getting older. Now you got to remember, he's part of the original Israelites. Remember, he was one of the two of the spies that came back and gave a good report. So he's getting up there in age. He was there when they crossed the Red Sea. He had helped conquer all these ites. So let's remind ourselves who those ites were. We had the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. So those were the ites that God said, go in and drive them out. And he said, I'll go in and drive them out. Of course, Israel had to do their part too to help drive them out. Okay? So there are others that are living in the land, and this land still needs to be taken. So let's look at verses 2 through 7. This is the land that yet remains, all the territory of the Philistines, and all that of the Gershurites, from Sihor, which is in the east of Egypt, as far as the border of Ekron northward, which is counted as Canaanite. The 5 lords of the Philistines, the Gazites, the Ashdodites, the Ashkelonites, the Gittites, and the Ekronites, also the Avites. From the south, all the land of the Canaanites and Mearah that belongs to the Sidonians, as far as Aphek, to the border of the Amorites, the land of the Gebalites, and all Lebanon toward the sunrise, from Baal-Gad, below Mount Hermon, as far as the entrance to Hamath. All the inhabitants of the mountains from Lebanon, as far as the brook Misraboth, and all the Sidonians. Them I will drive out before the children of Israel. Only divide it by lot to Israel as an inheritance, as I have commanded you. Now therefore, divide this land as an inheritance to the 9 tribes and the half-tribe of Manasseh. So, it's listing all these other people that were not among those 7 ites that we originally commanded to drive out. We hear some familiar names, the Philistines, we know about them. The Sidonians. It's listing all these people that still, so there's still pockets of people in the land that maybe not necessarily were under any of these kings they've already defeated, that have settled there, and they still have to drive them out. Now God says, I will drive them out. Well, that's what he said about the others. Israel still has to do their part. They have to actually do it. God just doesn't hand you stuff. You have to do your part too. But he says, even though they haven't been driven out, go ahead and divide up the land, because it's yours. Go ahead and do it. You have to do these things sometimes in faith. It maybe that doesn't look like it's completed, but God says, go ahead and do it. He said, go ahead and divide this land the way I've commanded you. Okay, because they had to have guidelines for dividing it up. So he said, as the way that I commanded you. It's just like we were saying, how do people handle success? All of a sudden you come into this great inheritance. What do you do with it? It would be real easy to say, we've won the promised land. All right, everybody go find you someplace. And they could have been out there and they could have been fighting each other. No, I want this property. No, I was here first. Right? We know that's probably what would happen because that's the way people are. It's the way we are. But God had already given them a plan. And we studied this back when we were doing our study in Numbers. But here's Numbers 26, verses 52 through 56. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, to these the land shall be divided as an inheritance according to the number of names. To a large tribe you will give a larger inheritance, and to a small tribe you will give a smaller inheritance. Each shall be giving its inheritance according to those who were numbered of them. But the land shall be divided by lot. They shall inherit according to the names of the tribes of their fathers. According to the lot, their inheritance shall be divided between the larger and the smaller. So this was part of the plan God had given them before they even went into the promised land. He was already laying, remember we talked about all the different things that he put in place before they ever even went into the land. This was one of them. Levi would not have any inheritance, but they were going to get cities. They were going to divide by size, larger area to a larger tribe, which makes sense, smaller area to a smaller tribe. And because the 2.5 tribes decided to take theirs on the other side of the Jordan, that meant that now it would only be 9.5 tribes that would be dividing it up. Okay. So now they're ready to divide up the land. They've reached that goal. And Joshua continues in his old age to be a wise and experienced leader. So in the rest of 13, what he does, he outlines for Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh what area they would have. And that would include an area where there are still some people in the land. So again, that's one of those, it's a listing. It's telling you, oh, it's from here to there. You know, you can read that for yourself, but here's what we want to pull out of it and look at and kind of make a note of. Joshua 13:13 said, "Nevertheless, the children of Israel did not drive out the Geshurites or the Maccathites, but the Geshurites and the Maccathites dwell among the Israelites until this day." So already we're seeing they're not completing the work. They were supposed to drive them out, but they didn't. Okay? So that's basically chapter 13 in Joshua, is the dividing of that land among Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. Now chapter 14 deals with dividing the land. It starts to talk about dividing now this land to the west of the Jordan, which is the promised land, and also a very important piece of property that had to be given out. So let's look at 14 verses 1 through 5. "These are the areas which the children of Israel inherited in the land of Canaan, which Eleazar the priest, Joshua the son of Nun, and the heads of their fathers of the tribes of the children of Israel distributed as an inheritance to them. Their inheritance was by lot, as the Lord commanded by the hand of Moses, for the 9 tribes and the half-tribe. For Moses had given the inheritance of the 2 tribes and the half-tribe among them on the other side of the Jordan. But to the Levites he had given no inheritance among them. For the children of Joseph were 2 tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim, and they had no part to the Levites of the land, except cities to dwell in, with their common lands, for their livestock and property. As the Lord commanded Moses, so the children of Israel did, and they divided the land." So that kind of gives you the overview of how this goes. They divided, the 2.5 tribes first, nothing for the Levites, and then, the 2 half tribes replaced the Levites among the 12 tribes. But in addition to all this, there was a special promise that had to be kept. So let's look at Joshua 14:6 through 9. "Then the children of Israel came to Joshua in Gilgal, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh and the Kenizzite said to him, 'You know the word which the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, concerning you and me in Kadesh Barnea. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land, and I brought back word to him as was in my heart. Nevertheless, my brethren who went up with me made the heart of the people melt, but I wholly followed the Lord my God. So Moses swore on that day, saying, Surely the land where your foot has trodden shall be your inheritance and your children's forever, because you have wholly followed the Lord my God.'" So Caleb, he had followed God. He had come back. He had given a good report. He had stood by that report. And Moses had told him that his reward would be the area that he went, that he and his family would inherit that. And you'll find that in Numbers 14:24. It says, "But my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit in him, has followed me fully. I will bring him into the land where he went, and his descendants shall inherit it." So Caleb's come. It's time to divide the land, and he's come and he's reminding Joshua of the promise that God made. There, you can do that. You can remind God, you made me this promise. You promised me this. He's true to his promises. Okay? Verses 10 through 12. He continues. And now, behold, the Lord has kept me alive, as he said, these 45 years, ever since the Lord spoke this word to Moses while Israel wandered in the wilderness. And now, here I am this day, 85 years old. As yet, I am as strong this day as on the day Moses sent me. Just as my strength was then, so now is my strength for war, both going out and for coming in. Now, therefore, give me this mountain of which the Lord spoke in that day. For you heard in that day how the Anakim were there, and that the cities were great and fortified. It may be that the Lord will be with me, and I shall be able to drive them out as the Lord said. I hope when I'm 85, I'm like Caleb. He said, I'm just as strong now as I was then. He was ready to go to battle. I want to aspire to that. Judah is going to get the first allotment because Caleb is from the tribe of Judah. So they're going to have to give Caleb his land before they can dish out the rest of Judah's. And chapter 15 of Joshua is that long listing, if you want to go, and they list it clan by clan, who's getting what property and where it goes to, all those borders. But you can read that for yourself. Okay? But there are a couple little nuggets in 15 that I want to share with you. One is verse 14. So 15:14. Caleb drove out the 3 sons of Anak from there. Sheshai, I'm doing my best with these folks. Ahiman and Talmai, the children of Anak. So he did drive out the giants that were in that land. He said that he could do it, that he was just as strong, and if the Lord be with him, he would do it, and he did. Okay, so he drove them out. But look what happens here in verse 63. Some of his clansmen were not as successful. As for the Jebusites, remember that was one of the ites, the original 7 ites. As for the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the children of Judah could not drive them out. But the Jebusites dwell with the children of Judah at Jerusalem to this day. Some of you may remember from reading about David in 2 Samuel, remember he goes to conquer Jerusalem. Who's there? The Jebusites. They were still there. Okay, so he had to conquer them. So here we go. We're seeing another little yeah, they've inherited the land, but they didn't get rid of this little group of people. What did we say about a little leaven? Okay. If you go into chapters 16 and 17, both those chapters deal with the half-tribes. Of course, we have Ephraim, and that was actually Joshua's tribe. But then you also have what they're going to refer to as West Manasseh. So apparently there were some in Manasseh that wanted to be with Reuben and Gad on the other side, but there were some clans that chose to stay within the Promised Land. So 16 and 17, it's going to list out what land they get. Okay? Just like going to the courthouse and reading that record. Now let's look at Joshua 16, verse 10. And they did not drive out the Canaanites who dwelt in Gezer, but the Canaanites dwell among the Ephraimites to this day and have become forced laborers. So they didn't drive them out, but they did conquer them in a way that they, here they came from Egypt where they were forced labor. And what have they done? They have done the same thing. They have become overseers over another people, put them into forced labor. So just kind of note that. Over in 17, let's look at verses 3 through 6. But Zelophehad, the son of Hepher, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, had no sons, but only daughters. And these are the names of his daughters: Mahlah, Noah, Hagla, Milcah, and Tirzah. And they came near before Eleazar the priest, before Joshua the son of Nun, before the rulers, saying, The Lord commanded Moses to give us an inheritance among our brothers. Therefore, according to the commandment of the Lord, he gave them an inheritance among their father's brothers. 10 shares fell to Manasseh beside the land of Gilead and Bashan, which were on the other side of the Jordan, because the daughters of Manasseh received an inheritance among his sons, and the rest of Manasseh's sons had the land of Gilead. So, do you remember us talking about this? About the 5 daughters who said, "Hey, our father's gone. He left no sons. We want that inheritance." And remember, they got together and they said, "Yeah, it's fitting. It's right that we should give them that inheritance." And then, it was like, "Oh, but what if they marry out?" And then other people, so they had to marry within their tribe to keep the land within their tribe. So we're seeing all these things that we've studied before are being taken into account now. These promises. Caleb had a promise of specific land. These daughters were promised that they would receive an inheritance. So they're making sure that all these promises are being kept. Something else in chapter 17 we want to look at, verses 12 through 13. Yet, it's always hard when it says yet. Yet, the children of Manasseh could not drive out the inhabitants of those cities, but the Canaanites were determined to dwell on that land. And it happened when the children of Israel grew strong that they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but did not utterly drive them out. So here we have another tribe that within their land are these people. They didn't drive them out like they were supposed to. And you have to wonder why. They were so good when they were all together, but now that they're tribe by tribe, it's like they're losing a little bit of their strength, their determination. And they're putting them to forced labor. Now, it could be a lot of people don't like confrontation. They want to try to do it the peaceful way. But sometimes you need confrontation. And forced labor, that's going to increase their wealth. So why not? There's all kinds of ways you can rationalize not doing what you're supposed to do. So that's chapter 17. Chapter 18. We're going to be talking about some of the rest of the land, but let's look verses 1 through 3. Now the whole congregation of the children of Israel assembled together at Shiloh, and set up the tabernacle of meeting there. And the land was subdued before them. But there remained among the children of Israel 7 tribes which had not yet received their inheritance. Then Joshua said to the children of Israel, How long will you neglect to go and possess the land which the Lord God of your fathers has given you? How long? How long is it going to take for you to take up what God's given you? How long are you going to wait? That's the question that we need to ask ourselves. Joshua's saying, hey, we've already won this. What are you waiting for? Sometimes we just leave things on the table, don't we? We don't go and claim it, and we let it go. I'm always amazed every year when the state publishes the unclaimed property. It's pages and pages. I'm like, I'll take it. You don't want to go get it? I'll go get it. We don't want to have people steal our blessings. We need to go out and get it. And Joshua's saying, what are you waiting for? How long is this going to take? We've already won this. We can get to where we wanted to be, but then we don't possess it. It's just like that dog chasing, wanting to chase the car, and then when you stop, it's like, well, I don't want that. I'm walking away from it. What makes people do that? Well, fear, doubt, procrastination, just overall procrastination, feeling unprepared, feeling ill-equipped. These are things that can make us hesitate. So in verses 4 through 5, he says, pick out from among you 3 men from each tribe, and I will send them. They shall rise and go through the land, survey it according to their inheritance, and come back to me. And they shall divide it into 7 parts. Judah shall remain in their territory on the south, and the house of Joseph shall remain in their territory on the north. So this makes them at least get out there and do something to get started. Get out there, just go out and see what's out there, report back to me, and then we're going to figure this out. We're going to get it divided. It's going to be divided by lot, but let's get some boundaries. That's how we get these maps. We want to go out and survey. And Joshua's using some wisdom here, but I want you to look at what he says there about Judah's going to remain in the south and Ephraim to the north. This is kind of setting up that north and south territories, and we see a lot of that as we go into Samuel and to Kings, how that comes into play. Verses 8 through 10. Then the men arose to go away, and Joshua charged those who went to survey the land, saying, Go, walk through the land, survey it, and come back to me, that I might cast lots for you here before the Lord in Shiloh. So the men went, passed through the land, and wrote the survey in a book, in 7 parts by cities. And they came to Joshua at the camp in Shiloh. Then Joshua cast lots for them in Shiloh before the Lord, and there Joshua divided the land to the children of Israel according to their divisions. So, sometimes you need a little kick, don't you, to get you going. And that's what he did for them. He got them out there, got them to see the land, got them to make, they made a book. Oh, this is exactly what it is. Sometimes you got to draw people a picture. You got to draw me a picture, okay? I'm just going to tell you right now. I'm a visual person. I want to see it. So he had to draw them a picture. It's a picture of the land, and when you're overwhelmed, it's good to break these things down into tasks. Sometimes it's like you're given this task to do, and it's huge. Let's break it down to parts. Jim's getting ready to have a big concert here in about a month. I think, we're just going to have people up here singing. Well, you know what? It's a bigger project than that. You've got people coming in from all over. You got to know where to park them. You got to worry about security. You got to wonder how you're going to get them in and out of here. You got to make sure that you got the right equipment. How are you going to promote it? There's a lot to it. But when you have a big task like that, break it down into smaller components. And get somebody to help you. You don't have to do it all by yourself. No. So then chapter 18, he didn't pay me to say that, by the way. Chapter 18 finishes then with it's starting now the allotment, and it's an allotment for Benjamin. Then we move into chapter 19, and chapter 19 is just that allotment of the land among the rest of them. There's Simeon, which if you read, we learn that they take Simeon's out of some of Judah's because Judah had too much. So they took some out of there. Zebulun, Issachar, Asher, Naphtali, Dan. These are all these tribes that we've been following all across the desert and into the promised land. And so they're finally getting their land. Here's a little piece in 19, verse 47. And the border of the children of Dan went beyond these, because the children of Dan went up to fight against Leshem and took it. And they struck it with the edge of the sword and took possession of it and dwelt in it. They called it Leshem Dan, after the name of Dan their father. So here's a tribe that did. They went and fought and they took it. Okay? Somebody's doing it. But let's go to 49 and 50. When they made an end of dividing the land as an inheritance according to their borders, the children of Israel gave an inheritance among them to Joshua, the son of Nun. According to the word of the Lord, they gave him the city which he asked for, Timnath-serah, in the mountains of Ephraim, and he built the city and dwelt in it. Joshua took his portion last. Joshua was the leader. Joshua was just like Caleb. He had been one of the two that came back with a good report. He could have said, hey, I got you all through this. I'm taking mine first. He didn't do that, did he? He was very humble. He was very wise, he said. He made sure everybody, and that's what a leader does. A leader takes care of their people first. a leader. He is a servant leader. He took care of all of them, and then he said, I just want this city. That's what I want. This is going to be where I have my home. Timnath Serah means the remaining portion. Isn't that the way we are with our kids? We make sure that they have what they need, and then what's ever left, then we'll take it. Isn't that like our God? He makes sure we have what we have need of. Verse 51. These were the inheritances which Eleazar the priest, Joshua the son of Nun, and the heads of the fathers of the tribes of the children of Israel divided as an inheritance by lot in Shiloh before the Lord, at the door of the tabernacle of the meeting. So they made an end of dividing the country. So the job's done now. Now all the tribes, they have these territories to make them their home. And as we see, some had a problem getting rid of some of those inhabitants that were still hanging around. God said he would drive them out, but they had to be willing to do their part too. For years, they had all lived together in the camp, right? I mean, it was a pretty big camp. You know, we're talking about over 1 million people. It's a pretty big camp, but they'd all been together. And now they're going to kind of be all spread out all over the place by tribe. Now, chapter 20 establishes the city of refuge. Now, we studied those here not too long ago. We talked about the cities of refuge, but just as a reminder, here's a summary, verses 1 through 3. The Lord also spoke to Joshua, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, Appoint for yourselves cities of refuge, which I have spoke to you through Moses, that the slayer who kills a person accidentally or unintentionally may flee there, and they shall be your refuge from the avenger of blood. So that kind of reminds you of that. And then chapter 21 establishes the town for the Levites. In verses 21 verses 1 through 3 says, Then the heads of the fathers of the house of the Levites came near to Eleazar the priest, to Joshua the son of Nun, and to the heads of the fathers of the houses of the tribes of the children of Israel. And they spoke to them at Shiloh in the land of Canaan, saying, The Lord commanded through Moses to give us cities to dwell in with their common lands for our livestock. So the children of Israel gave to the Levites from their inheritance at the commandment of the Lord these cities and their common lands. So again, these promises, these things that God had already set up in advance, they're having to put them into place. It's coming into play because they had a plan. It wasn't like they just said, oh, we're in the promised land, and they all just ran crazy and they're grabbing stuff. They had a plan because God had prepared them. You have to prepare for when you reach that goal. When you finally get that thing that you've been striving for, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to handle it? So we're going to pick up there. So I want you to, if you haven't read from 12 on, when you get a chance, sit down, try to read through it. Be reading ahead into the next chapters. We'll be doing 21 and 22, and then maybe some more, depending on how much time we have.